two hometown Detroiters, so thank you to all you out-towners. Yes. Before we start, I'm Shannon Marcangelo, as introduced, with Quantcast. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Quantcast, we're a DSP, audience insights, and measurement tool. We leverage our real-time data and AI to drive measurable outcomes for our clients across the open web. And I'm sure you've all heard of General Motors. Yes. So we'll get a little bit more into our introductions now. But first, we wanted to kind of play along with the theme of sports and talk a little bit of get to know you. So starting out, did you play sports growing up? And if so, what did you play?
I did. I played football, although I didn't get into my growth spurt until well into my senior year, so I was pretty ineffective on the field. But I took a liking to boxing. So through my senior year of high school into all of college, I was actually a licensed amateur boxer. So that was super exciting. Really great way to get hurt. Although the two questions I'm asked were like, do you wear headgear or did you break your nose? I never broke my nose because I always wore headgear. So.
Smart.
Yeah.
All right, so don't pick a fight with you tonight at dinner. Yeah.
I'm a lover, not a fighter.
Okay, so this might be an obvious question perhaps, but what's your favorite sports team?
It's now the Lions, although I grew up loving the Denver Broncos. My uncle is a huge football fan, and he loved John Elway. So watching Elway was just magical to me. I think he's one of the best of all time. So big Denver Broncos fan, but I married into a fanatical Lions fan. My wife's actually up there. She's in the industry. She works at Roundel. Great talk to for anything on retail media. But her family is just fanatical Lions fans. So they've had season tickets since like '68. So before they were even at the Silverdome, back at Lake Briggs Field. So whether it's by choice or baptism by fire, I'm now a Lions fan.
Good for you. All right, the last question regarding sports, kind of here. What was the last live sporting event you attended?
It was when the Lions beat the Buccaneers to go to the NFC Championship, which was it was on fire, right? The city was magical. But that was the same time when GM actually launched a new logo on top of the red sun with the wagging tail of the lion, which is really cool. It drove a lot of earned media, so that was really awesome.
Awesome. I remember that. Very cool. All right. Well, we're here to talk a little bit about MarTech today, maybe a little bit divergent of the topics that we've had in sports earlier today, but we've got about 30 minutes or less now, so we'll dive into it. Obviously, with General Motors, there was some great news this week. Q1 earnings report came out, better than expectations. Congratulations. Tell us a little bit about your role within leading MarTech and kind of how that plays into driving success with General Motors.
Yeah, absolutely. So my role within General Motors is to lead marketing technology for the organization, focused on all of the marketing and ad tech platforms we use to engage with customers. So that's everything from our real-time CDP platform that aggregates customer data in terms of how we segment audiences to put those into paid media or drive campaigns through own channels, through to all of our campaign execution platforms. So that's everything from email, SMS, push notifications, all the creative asset management platforms, through to data capture and analytics. So it's really an end-to-end focus, as well as a lot of the ad tech we use to drive paid media.
Awesome. Great. Thanks for that. Let's talk a little bit about GM. So obviously General Motors is in a transformation to electric vehicles. That's no secret. A lot of launches this year. Exciting year for GM with the EV launches. Can you kind of share a little bit about how that shift to EV plays into your role in your department?
Yeah, absolutely. So the shift to EV, I think, is super exciting for a number of reasons. Number one, electric vehicles themselves are just really exciting vehicles to drive. But from a marketing technology perspective, there's probably two things that come to mind that impact the work we do. Number one, a lot of the vehicles that are coming to market today generally have an ICE or gasoline engine counterpart. So you can think about the new Cadillac Escalade, the Silverado EV. So now we have two of those different vehicles. From a MarTech perspective, we're building the platform to be able to manage the throughput of just pushing these campaigns out to market. And there's just a lot more product now that we're pushing. So we need to make sure that platforms are super resilient to manage that. So there's just a lot more bandwidth that we're just putting towards managing the platforms, making sure the integrations are effective, making sure we can get the right audiences at scale, both on the owned channels and the paid media channels in a timely fashion. But the other thing that happens with electrification is the push for EV also changes the engagement with the customer. So these vehicles are dramatically more connected. There's more of a focus on digital engagement in the vehicle and outside the vehicle, which changes the way that we market to our customers and engage with our customers. So an example of that is you have now this proliferation of additional services that are sold with the vehicle itself, beyond just marketing campaigns say, hey, come buy this vehicle. It's come buy an experience. So you're buying the EV, you're getting additional products and services like OnStar, advanced security monitoring, support for charging your vehicle, but also a focus on the actual infotainment panel itself. So, the in-head unit in the car is also now a channel that we start thinking about. So what it's done is really open the aperture for how we think about marketing in the OEM landscape. That traditionally was a bit more one-to-one around getting in a vehicle, but now it's around building a connected experience over time across many different channels.
I love that. All right, so EVs. Have you personally made the shift to an EV?
Not yet. So I'm driving a Cadillac XT6. It's a full-sized SUV. It's great for a 2.5-year-old. You can fit, car seat in the back, stroller. Does great in the snow. Good EPA mileage. How am I doing? Am I selling it pretty well? So it's great, but I am really excited to get an EV. So I've got a 220-volt outlet in my garage. So we're equipped and we're ready. Either want to get the Cadillac Lyric, which I think is a fantastic feature, some good head nods, all right? It's selling really well if you guys listen to the last earnings report. But really futuristic looking, great mileage, so you can get from point A to point B in a single charge. And if I don't do that, I'm thinking about getting the Hummer EV, although I don't know if that can literally fit up my driveway. It's 9,000 pounds, which is crazy. And I also don't know if it can clear the garage ceiling.
SUV or the truck?
Yeah. What's that?
SUV or the truck?
They're both massive.
Yeah.
So, but ask me in a few months, maybe.
Yeah, all right, we'll see.
We'll see which one I get it to.
Yes, exactly. All right, so let's switch a little bit to talk about MarTech here and kind of innovations in the space and what's to come. What's most exciting for you that you're seeing in terms of innovations in MarTech?
Innovations in MarTech, I think where I get really excited is the convergence from an omnichannel perspective between paid media and owned and earned channels. So where we're spending a lot of our time at GM is focusing on how we build a center of gravity around our CDP platform. So a customer data platform is where a lot of the data we get around our consented first-party owner data comes in, and then we also start piling on relevant third-party data sets into that. Where it becomes super exciting is when you start looking at how paid media plays into a customer's engagements in owned channels. So whether it's CRM, whether it's through a mobile app. So when someone comes up for a lease renewal or they're in market for a vehicle, I can start really looking at how I pull different levers to manage my investment best. So I'd rather send you, as Shannon, an email to get you excited and involved with coming to the GM family to renew a lease or buy a vehicle, and save that dollar to reinvest somewhere else, to target someone who maybe is not part of the GM family. And it's a different way of thinking about how you manage marketing and media investments that focuses on a true omni-channel journey, rather than thinking about, we have a media strategy and then we have an own strategy. I think whether or not we like to admit, they're starting to converge. And from a MarTech perspective, the best we can do is start building the products and services that the organization needs to take advantage of that.
All right, well,
Not easy.
yeah, no, it's called work, right?
Yeah.
So we're here within the draft today, so the spirit of the NFL, of course, talking a little bit about sports again, but within the NFL, one of the most watched events on television. But kind of how people are viewing has been shifting more from broadcast to streaming. So talking a little bit about that shift with CTV, can you share a little bit more about how CTV is a part of strategy and even from a MarTech approach?
Yeah, absolutely. So GM is a top 5, top 10 advertiser. We spend a lot on CTV and a lot of other channels. I love connected TV because it's addressable by nature. You've got providers and platforms that have consented first-party data that they capture at the time of sign-up. And they have a lot of rich information that can help drive contextual targeting when it's needed. So I can go to a provider and say, hey, I have a customer set I want to target that's maybe individuals in their 30s that are within this income bracket. And I can get really interesting insights from them in terms of viewability, what they watch, when they watch it. So what's exciting with Connected TV is that I can take my data from that CDP platform that I manage, that I mentioned we manage and we're building the center of gravity around, and start layering in relevant CTV audience sets and models against it to get hyper-personalized with the people I want to target, but also figure out when I want to target them. If it's during a specific episode, if it's during a specific time of year, and then starting to figure out how that interplays back with my audience set. So we're super excited because it's the level of granularity we get back in terms of the data we use to be specific and precise about who we target, when we target them, but also figuring out how to drive attribution against it is a lot more focused, cleaner, and detailed within CTV than just traditional linear.
I know we talked a little bit about personalization during our prep call. I think that's really interesting, especially with CTV, how you can do that now. All right, so CTV, of course, is one of many platforms that General Motors interacts with customers. Your customers across several channels. So talk a little bit about omni-channel, but can you address a little bit more about that kind of cross-channel and omni-channel approach with General Motors when it comes to MarTech?
Yeah, absolutely. From a MarTech perspective, we're challenged with figuring out how we build the right integrations to those platforms. So we've got fantastic world-class brand marketers that are coming up with these omni-channel strategies and visions, and we're kind of stuck in the middle where on any given day we're having conversations around brand strategy, omni-channel engagement strategy, but then also talking about how do we bring that to life? How do we actually do that with the integrations? And I got some folks here on my team that are involved in those conversations. So sometimes we're talking about how do we target the right audience? How do we actually get through to the first party, third party, supplementary data to know who we're talking to and when, but then also how do we optimize and test into that, doing things like A/B tests or optimization tests to understand the efficacy. From a pure omnichannel perspective, where it gets really interesting is just the sheer number of endpoints where we can target and talk to customers. So that can be on the web, that can be on a mobile app, that can be through SMS, that can be through a call center, and now becoming more and more involved with the actual vehicle itself, because that's within of itself a channel that you can personalize. So you can think about, I can change the hue of the light when someone gets in the vehicle, someone else gets in the vehicle, I can optimize and personalize that experience as well. And then lastly, the last leg in that is the paid media. So it's understanding how do I want to talk to a customer at the right moment in time based on a signal that tells me they're in market, they're interested in buying the vehicle, but how do I do it in a way that is honoring their preferences, their consents, but also just not being annoying. Reach and frequency gaps are important, and that's something that we spend a lot of time focusing on, where we're bringing that paid media and that CRM strategy together to say, yes, that person's in market, yes, they're watching the CTV program, yes, I know I can get them to watch the advertisement, do I need to? So it's also figuring out when you actually don't talk to someone that I think is equally as important as when you do.
I agree. I think that's really important. Probably all of us as consumers and marketers.
Yeah, how annoying is it when you get the same ad over and over and over? I was gonna buy it. Fucking buy it again.
All right, so we talked a little bit about cookieless. About CTV and some of the other platforms. Let's talk about cookieless.
We're hitting all the cliches today.
Yeah, we are. But big news not really big news, and not even really news.
Yeah. Did you guys see that Google's pushing back
cookies?
The end of cookies?
Again, next year at some point. So initially it was supposed to be Q3. I think we're towards the end of this year. So we've got a little bit more time. But of course, half the web is already cookieless. Many of the platforms and channels already don't leverage cookies. Mm-hmm. But half the web already still does have cookies. Yeah. So how is GM thinking about this, preparing for next year now, or even testing and learning now?
I think, so cookies are an interesting thing where I think it's been talked about for so long and it just hasn't come, that now we're finally at the stage where, companies, providers, the industry is starting to move away from cookies. A couple things are first-party cookies aren't actually going away, right? They're still going to be there on your domain. You're going to need them to be able to persist identity through someone's experience. And even third-party cookies will still exist in some fashion. They're going to be partitioned. And what that means is, they're partitioning the identity of the individual that's on the receiving end of the machine, on my phone, my laptop. What that means is you actually start having a problem with identity resolution. And that's kind of the crux of why people are freaking out at cookies. They don't know who the individual is on the other side of the machine. When you think of it that way, you kind of simplify the solution and say, cool, now I need to just figure out a way to identify individuals through my ecosystem. The reason it matters for advertisers is obviously for attribution and measurement. So that's kind of why we always go back to that. You've got folks like Google who have Privacy Sandbox and a number of other ways the industry is getting ready for cookieless. A lot of the social providers are starting to build their CAPI or conversions API solutions to be able to tell you exactly who converted and how they authenticate, which is super critical. From a brand perspective, especially something like General Motors, where we've got millions of in-market consumers a year, we're relying on the industry to figure out how to stitch back identity for us. What we're doing, though, is starting to isolate how do we get best-in-class, consented first-party data that's meaningful. Because as this kind of maturity changes to cookieless, it's all about identification of an individual using really good first-party data. So the stronger first-party data I have in my CDP platform, I can then go into a clean room or some type of privacy-compliant platform and do a data swap and look for either signals or look for conversion and attribution. And I think that's where we're really doubling down from a GM perspective, is getting really good first-party data and then starting to build really relevant partnerships with folks like Quantcast and others, where we can start using that data to make decisions.
Well, I think that's wise because there's so many solutions out there, but in order to get scale, it's not just one solution. So leveraging all the signals.
Yeah, so we're not too worried about it. I think we need to make sure that we're not too reliant on cookies as we kind of go through the next calendar year. But at the end of the day, I think if you're focused on really good first-party data, you'll reach that.
Well, we'll see. More to come next year. We'll revisit that.
Yeah, I'll let you know this.
Lastly would be a fireside chat around technology. We're going to talk about AI. Khalife. In the market here, of course, and a hot topic as always. But just to kind of kick that off a little bit, like who here has used AI? Any like ChatGPT for tools for like fun, for work? I mean, I plan trips. That way. It gives me a lot of inspiration and ideas.
Or finding furniture that fits. It's really good at you give it parameters for your room and it gives you exact sizing for.
I wish you pass around my. I like that. All right, that's a good one. Okay, so I was going to ask, professionally and personally, how do you use AI tools? That's a little bit more personally. So talk a little bit about furniture. I like that because you recently moved back home. I guess.
A couple years ago. Yeah, and actually, one time I was trying to figure out if something would fit in the trunk of my car. So I just asked ChatGPT and it gave me the exact dimension, compared it. So it's super helpful. But on the personal side, a little bit of tongue-in-cheek, I actually had a meeting with my team yesterday where, we're writing new job descriptions because our team's growing, which is great. But my recommendation was use ChatGPT or Gemini to write a job description. It's actually really good at doing that. You can feed it an existing JD and then give it a couple bullets and it's going to write this great job description for you. But I digress. From a GM perspective, through MarTech, I think there's probably 2 or 3 different areas that we're really excited and we're starting to investigate and pilot where generative AI and large language model functions come in. One of those is, as you think about the creative workflow for just generating really good creative that we put in media and marketing, one of those areas is things like background swaps, renditions and edits to images. And if you think about that from a GM perspective or any OEM, a photo shoot's really expensive. So you have all the trimmings that come with generally doing a really good photo shoot, but then you have to move a multi-thousand-pound durable good on stage, and then likely in many different colors as well. So generative functions will never cut any of that out, but it will at least simplify some of the more monotonous tasks that would have to go through doing that. And then from a pure MarTech platform perspective, where we're starting to work with partners like Salesforce and Adobe and others is leveraging AI is a little bit of a co-pilot for how you build end-to-end omni-channel journeys. So within our CDP platform today, we have a journey orchestration function. So I can have this beautiful canvas where I can start essentially dropping if-then statements. If this person starts on the site and then they take this action, I can hit them with a notification on the app, and if they don't respond to that, I can drive paid media. a lot of that takes quite a bit of time working with brand marketers to just ideate how do these functions actually get defined, what does a journey look like, and how do you take it from a journey map through to an actual execution on the platform. AI is generally really good at looking at pattern recognition with big data sets, but then also integrating that into your actual workflow to say, maybe we're not going to go into a full end-to-end journey based on what the AI is recommending, but can it give us a starting place? And that's something that's really exciting.
That's great. Well, I think that there's a lot more to come, obviously, with AI, both uses. Now I know I'm going to do some furniture planning at home from a personal perspective.
It's great.
But that's great. And then even, again, reconnecting on that too, because things are evolving so quickly and changing with cookieless and AI, of course, and many other the trends in the MarTech world. So
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for your time today. Great to have this discussion. Thank you, everyone, for having us.
Awesome. Well, Hans, Shannon, I'd like to just maybe open the floor up for a few questions.
Yeah.
Do you have any from the crowd here?
Just real quick, what AI platform do you prefer the most of the medium for, like, for a marketing perspective?
Now, do you mean like in general or from like a creative? Because you got like Valet, you've got ChatGPT's got an open source platform. I think for organizations that are looking at something that's kind of at the intersection between creative and MarTech, Adobe's Firefly is actually really, really robust, which is really cool. I think then there's a number of different like open source platforms you can look at that's got LLM models you can build off of. Like Apache's got something. You can always integrate it with ChatGPT. Their GPT 3.5 function is pretty open source as well. But I'd say what we're spending a lot of time using today is investigating how Firefly works from a creative workflow integration perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about this from a few different angles, but curious if incrementality plays a role in your paid media testing and measurement plans.
Yeah, absolutely. And a little bit later, you can hit up the test and learn team that's down here. So we've got a team specifically focused on optimizations and incrementality, both from a CRM and paid media perspective. What we try doing, and we're getting better at this, is any campaign we launch, whether it's CRM or paid media, we do some type of holdout against that to be able to measure lift and incrementality. And what that turns into is understanding what tactics work, what tactics don't work, but then you can start putting dollars against it. So you start having actual tangible conversations with senior leadership, because if you can tie a dollar figure, a CPM rate, some type of incremental savings or reach against it, it becomes a much more fruitful conversation. The challenge is just building the team to be able to have those types of conversations and also have the muscle memory to do that every single time has been where I think we've seen the most challenge.
There we are, right there.
So curiosity, from the role of sponsorship in creating, we're trying to approach a customer that can create a great experience. Obviously, the client's going to have that emotional experience, I'm sure, in the box. But how do you think about it from your perspective? Does it impact your role at all?
Okay, good question. Maybe not directly from a sponsorship perspective, but I think from a partnerships perspective, where we have conversations from a MarTech standpoint is how do we integrate the work we do from a MarTech platform or capability perspective with that partner? So whether that's something like Spotify, where we're talking about their release of Dolby Atmos and they want to run a co-branded campaign, for example, how do we actually execute that campaign to be able to feed data back to them, but also receive the right data or assets or workflow, platform integrations, things like tags or pixels. So we're more focused on how does that actually fit into the execution rather than the strategy, but it's a great question.
Awesome. Well, that's what we have for the crowd here. Shannon, I just want to thank you both so much. Not sure if this is exclusive for the young marketers in the room, but I found your panel to be extremely insightful, very educational. So thank you both so much.